there is co-teaching being done in Beltsville. However, my classroom is not a co-teaching model. I believe that right now only the first grade is a co-teaching model, and that is where we have a general ed teacher along with a special ed teacher in the classroom. It depends upon the IEPs that the kids have, how many hours are written in their IEP, and how many students. Depends upon whether or not they get a second teacher in there. So, for example, I have 12 students that have an IEP. However, their hours on their IEP are only like 1 or 2 hours a day, or some of them are only a week. So because of that, that's the reason why I only have a special ed teacher for part of the day.
Okay.
And generally what we try to do is, the key with co-teaching is planning, is making sure everyone's on the same page, making sure that what I'm being taught to the rest of the class is a lot of times when co-teaching comes into mind, the co-teacher then sometimes pulls a group aside and works with the same skill or the same strategy in order for the kids to get better at it. I haven't had too much experience with co-teaching. I do have an ESOL teacher also that comes in, and we make sure we're all on the same page in order to effectively teach a lesson. It's not that just one teacher teaches while the other teacher is sitting down at their desk. Everybody is teaching. So that's one difference with co-teaching that sometimes gets misconstrued, where they think, oh, well, the special ed teacher is here now, I can sit down at my desk and do work.
Okay.
With a true co-teaching model, everybody's teaching. So
everybody is teaching now. The task that is taught is the same. The objective is the same, right?
Right.
Then what is the use of this co-teaching? Like, why? What is the purpose of putting two teachers now in your classroom? I'm saying, like, Ms. Henson is tackling some other learning aspect, and you are doing some aspect, and the children are moving in groups, sometimes independent study and sometimes with special ed teachers sometimes. So the task varies.
Right.
But in a co-teaching, you say that there are two teachers teaching the same task. So what is the purpose of it?
The purpose is for the children to be exposed to different ways of doing it. A lot of times, something that the special ed teacher does can break it down a little bit further than what I can, because I have to reach everyone, whether they're on grade level, above grade level, or below grade level. So a lot of times what the special ed teacher does is she looks at what I'm doing and she finds different ways of breaking it down to make it easier for those kids that are having trouble in a certain area, maybe with vocabulary. She'll work on different vocabulary skills with those children.
But to that same, with relevance to the same task.
Yes.
It is not standalone task of vocabulary like how I saw it being done in this class. It will be addressed to the same task.
Typically, that's how it's supposed to be. Like I said, I haven't had the experience of a co-teaching environment.
All right. So it is a method for differentiating the task to the needs of particular children?
Right.
All right. Do you apply in this school, do you have any method of doing multiple intelligence mapping of the class for developing lesson plans?
Yes.
Specific to children?
Yes. A lot of times, you'll see it with my class a lot. We do a lot of hands-on experiences, because I found a lot of my kids do better by actually physically doing something instead of just necessarily reading a book and answering a question. I think you remember the first time you came in, my class was doing an exercise with cause and effect, where they had to match up the cause and the effect, and they also had to do gluing and pasting to get the cause and effect together. And I feel that a lot of times we have to make sure we go through all the different multiple intelligences in order to create our lessons to make
So-
them effective for
Yeah,
everyone.
so you generally do whole class, like you have all kinds of inputs, something to do, something to read, something to touch and see, and something to maybe pictures.
Right.
So it is for the whole class, not for particular children.
Right.
Yeah.
And some children do have to have that on their desk. There's a child in my classroom who in order to subtract, she has to have little markers in order to move in order to be able to subtract.
Okay.
Where other students, they don't need that. But for her, she has to visually see the amount being subtracted. She can't just figure it out.
Now, you did mention today that your children have gone to the test and they have not matched to the state standards. Now, the state standard test, how many times is it carried out in a year?
That's the test that we took was a county-based test, so it's just for Prince George's County in Maryland. The actual test that we take is in March, and there's only one test a year.
Yeah.
So what we're working towards is being able for them to be at least proficient on the test by March.
Oh, so you have this county-based test. Okay, how many times are the county-based tests?
I believe we have 4 of them. So we took one in October. There's one each quarter. So, and typically the last one is, I want to say, right before or right after the last test that we take. Or before our big test, I'm sorry. And those tests are supposed to give a gauge on how the kids are going to do on the state test that we have.
Okay. So, what do you do now? Now you find that children are not grade level 2. I mean, is it just marginal or is it some serious concern, like they are way below grade level? What is it like, if I can ask that question?
Sure. Well, as a school, what we do is we have meetings called Data U, and we go over all the data that we received from the test. So we look at how the children performed and what we need to do in order to make it better. We can get reports that tell us down to the question how many students got that question right, and from there,
Item analysis.
we decide what needs to be retaught, and we squeeze it in during the school day. For example, this morning, my class struggled on phonics on the test. So this morning for morning work, they had to do a worksheet on phonics. We went over it together, and we'll keep doing phonics every day. So hopefully it'll stick.
So it was only phonics of reading that...
No, that was just one area. We struggled in a lot of areas, but we can't reteach everything in one day. So we do have to come back and revisit all of those skills that they struggled with. We can do it with the text that we're reading now. Another example is my students did very bad with text features. So yesterday when we were doing our health work, we were looking at our health book before we got started, and we had to pick out what a text feature was and how they help us read and that sort of thing. So we started doing
Can you tell again? Text, what is it?
our health textbook.
Uh-huh.
And a text feature like pictures or captions, title, subtitle, charts involved. My children really struggled with what they are and how they're used on the test. So what we are doing is every time we see a text feature, we go over what text features are on that page and how they help us.
That's very interesting. So, as part of your language lesson, you take this aspects of, like, you're teaching a lesson, it's not just comprehension and vocabulary, even these aspects like text features, which you're talking about, is taken up as part of language learning.
Right. And I mean, it goes cross-curricular. We try to include things from science and social studies. I mean, for now, because we had such a difficult time with text features, anytime we go to read any text at all, whether it be social studies or science, or even some math books have, you know, text features in them, you know, we're going to point out what the text features are every single time. And then what we're going to do is we're going to reassess those skills once they've all been retaught and see if they got any better. And that way, hopefully, for the next test, they'll do better on the next county-wide test. And then we can look at that data and see what we need to focus on now.
That's really very interesting. So in coming back to co-teaching, it is only done with a general ed teacher and a special ed teacher.
That's the way, yes, it's done in this school. Yes.
Okay. So they plan together and then carry it out.
Right.
I mean, how frequently is it done? On a regular basis or maybe in a week, can you say?
It just depends. I believe usually co-teachers, they are touching base with each other once a week. Sometimes more than that, depending on what needs are going on in the classroom.
Okay. And I would like to ask you some very pertinent question. You must have seen in your teaching career, I mean, how many years have you been a teacher?
I've been teaching for 6 years.
6 years. Now, in your 6 years of service, you must have seen some this challenge children having some physical disabilities. Previously, they were in special ed, like segregated environments, right? You must have seen such kids, and now you're allowing this inclusive practices. And I believe Prince George County, I read up Maryland website that Maryland, there is a website called Maryland something for inclusive education. There is a group. In their website, it says that Prince George County for almost 20 years has been pushing this policy quite strongly.
Right.
So what do you think? How effective is this? I mean, as a teacher, I'm asking you, forget all the legislation and all your... are there benefits for the kids? Do the kids like it, or do all parents like their kids to be included in the classroom? I'm talking about parents whose children are disabled, and I mean, abroad, your opinion about it.
Okay. Well, this is my personal opinion. I really think it depends on the student. I think there are some students that they have disabilities that we can meet their needs in the general ed classroom. And I think it does help them to be in a general ed classroom. I have students that have some emotional issues, and I think it's good for them to be around other students to show them proper behaviors and that sort of thing. There's other students that I don't feel that it's benefiting. A lot of times they can cause a disruption in the classroom, and everyone's attention then turns to that. And that's when I think it doesn't work. But I'm kind of on the fence about whether or not it's the right thing or not. Parents in general, they want their kids in the general ed classrooms. There are a few that would like to have special services somewhere else. But for the most part, the parents want them to be included with the general ed students as well. That's what I've found.
So having such kids in the classroom asks for a very high degree of professionalism and the environment and planning and support, accommodation.
Right.
But it is possible. Do you think it is possible?
Yes, I do think it's possible. And like I said, I think for the most part, most children are able to be in the general ed classroom with the proper support. And there are a few that, like I said, have a difficult time being in a general ed classroom.
Because I'm taking the opinions of teachers to find out, what aspect of that special ed support is the most important in a inclusive setting.
Right.
So, a special ed teacher may look at only a group of disabilities or one particular disability specifically. But when they come to the class, this general ed class, what methods will be most useful in a because there are so many things involved, which would be the most useful. I'm trying to understand so that I focus only on that particular.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of times, I know in our classroom is just having the extra support in the classroom, having other people being able to take students aside and work in a small group with them, because there is so many of them in this classroom. I find that's my number one thing is if I could have somebody all day long, it would be a great benefit to me, and I think it would be a great benefit to the kids. So
Support and to help them meet individual needs. That is the key
right.
Approach that you look for success in an inclusive setting. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I have to go get them now.